So it was roughly about a year ago, and ever since then, I've been following along with it, trying to keep up, and it's been quite a whirlwind. 1.0 was finally released, I think, about a month ago, and C Sharp and specifically the ASP.NET MVC framework is something that I really love. And I know it's really, really easy to hate on .NET and throw it under the bus. And so this has been something I've been really excited to bring to a group that is maybe not so .NET centric. And so anybody that's here, and that sounds like you, thank you for coming, and I hope you find something nice out of this. I think you will. So I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. So let's start with the what. What is this? And sorry, before I continue on further, I am presenting this at Tulsa Tech Fest on Friday, and so the presentation is geared towards a more .NET centric group. I'm gonna do my best to kind of tilt it a little bit to where the group might not be so familiar with .NET. So bear with me there. So ASP.NET Core is the evolution of the ASP.NET framework. It's entirely rewritten to be lightweight and modular, and it is not at all a continuation of ASP.NET 4.6. Now 4.6 will definitely remain around for some time. Much like web forms, much like classic ASP, it will hang around. Modern tooling. So this is ASP.NET Core is complete with modern tooling such as a lightweight IDE, Visual Studio Code, which we'll get a glimpse of, and a command line interface for developers to use for their tools. It's open source, which is a brand new concept for Microsoft. This will allow developers to help kind of form and help them shape the way that the framework moves forward, as opposed to being behind a closed door, which Microsoft has been for pretty much ever. And it also gives us early insights to future releases and what they have coming. Helps us plan and shape how we want to run our projects. It's highly shippable. We'll see more on this later, but just know that right now, shipping a .NET application is not the easiest thing, right? It's not like packaging up a PHP app and just throwing it on any old Linux box. Well, that has pretty much changed now. It is a lot easier to ship this, and in fact, there's some unique aspects to it, such as when you ship it, you also ship the entire framework with it. We'll touch more on that later. Virtually every piece of the framework is modular and can be added or removed as seen fit by you. Right now, it's kind of, you just have the entire framework. Now it's entirely configurable. Why? Why the big change? This is a huge change. ASP.NET has been around for almost 15 years now. In dev years, that's, roughly equivalent to the age of Yoda. It's pretty damn old. It's bloated. It's old. Much of the fat has been trimmed down to some of the cores and the basics. One of the big examples is there's no more system.web namespace anymore. And like I said earlier, almost every aspect is configurable now. So tightly coupled to the machine, I kind of touched on this a little bit ago. No more do you have to worry about how the machine is set up that you're shipping to. You can run as many different versions of the framework on the server as you wish, because it's all self-contained to the application. Sounds like a bit of a pipe dream, right? Running multiple versions of .NET? Crazy. If you do that now, good luck. The rest of these, cross-platform, the rest of these 3 bullet points, let's be honest about it. Microsoft really had to make this change. They're betting big on web being an important platform. Things like desktop apps and even their mobile OS world is really starting to decrease. So they're betting big on web, and they're really making the right move here. Cross-platform is incredibly important for a lot of reasons. It's not just some trend, right, to get running on Mac, to get running on Linux, where all the hipsters are writing their Rubies and their nodes and whatnot. Almost every other language, especially for web, runs cross-platform, except .NET. So they're losing developers constantly to these languages. And this causes adoption problems with startups, and it makes it harder and more expensive to find new hires. And ultimately, it causes problems for both Microsoft and development shops because we're losing opportunity in the marketplace. Classic quote right here. There are only 2 hard things in computer science: cache and validation, and naming things. We're all familiar with this quote, I'm sure. And this couldn't be more apparent for Microsoft when they switched over to this new cross-platform system. If you're anything like me, you started digging in once you heard this news, like, oh my god, I gotta get it up and running right now. At that time, we had a much different naming convention than where we're at now. And the reason I bring this up, two reasons. One, if you started early like me, you may have given up somewhere along the way. I know I did. After about 3 iterations of huge changes, I'm like, okay, I got a job to do. I can't mess with this all freaking night just to get it running. So now that everything's all done, we can see where they've ended. So the other reason I mention it is because if you leave here, or a couple months from now, you start digging into learning ASP.NET Core, and you're doing searches on how to set things up, how to fix things, inevitably you're going to run into these older names. And I don't want you to get confused, because it'll get really weird. Well, I thought talking about Core 1.0, not ASP.NET 5. So just want to touch on a couple of these. ASP.NET 5 was the name for the web framework. It's now Core 1.0, as you'll kind of see down the column here. .NET Core, the underlying framework of everything, was called Core 5, changed to 1.0, and the big reason for this 5 to Core 1 was because things changed so radically that it didn't really feel like the next version. It was an entirely different version, so they made the right move in changing that name. Entity Framework 7, also Entity Framework Core now. DNVM, these three, DNVM, DNX, and DNU, were 3 separate command line utilities that made up the entirety of using the command line tools. DNVM was a .NET version manager. DNX, I think, was DNX execution environment or something like this. Is what you'd run the web server through. And DNU was .NET utilities. They made the obvious right decision and brought all of this into one and simply called it the .NET CLI. Everybody was confused about those 3 things. I could never get them straight. I presented on this a year ago and couldn't even get those 3 straight. It was ridiculous. The last 2, the CS Proj and Web Config. If you're a .NET developer, you're very familiar with these things, and you're very familiar with the CS Proj file holding a list of all the files in your project. And if they're not in that project, it does not show up in Visual Studio. The IDE basically manages this list, generates it for you. Total pain in the ass, right? If you just want to drop a file in there from Windows Explorer, it's not going to show up. It's just stupid. So .NET Core no longer runs like this. It will pick up what is on the file system, and it's part of the project. Web config is an XML configuration file changed to a JSON format. Some people really like this. I'm one of those people that really likes that idea. But notice that they're all changing back to what they were previously. This is something that we'll run into when we get a little bit further here. This is not a change that's official. They have said that they are changing back to this. 1.0 has released, and that change has not been made final yet. So those 2 files are a little bit in limbo right now. So keep all that in mind. We are going to be dealing just with Mac OS tonight. Everything we're doing here will work on Windows. It'll work on Linux. There might be just slightly different tweaks and how to run it and whatnot. The installation is very easily. You'll install Homebrew on Mac, and if you've developed on a Mac, you probably already have it. You need to install OpenSSL. Once that's installed, you can download the installer from .net, .net, and that'll be where you download. No matter what your operating system is, the installer will be there. It's very easy. It's just a DMG, run it. It's good to go. It will attempt to put a variable in your system path. If you're using Z-Shell or any other variant, it might not get in there because it's looking for your bash RC. So if you've got a different file, it might not get in there. There's a link at the bottom that'll tell you what you need to name that variable and what to populate it with. Whew. So demos. So this is my last slide. I'm just going to talk about what we're going to be demoing. It'd be impossible to cover every aspect of Core in an hour, but now that we got a little history and what have yous out of the way, I just want to talk about a whirlwind kind of bottom to top dev walkthrough, touch on all the basics here. And so we'll be touching on the following: .NET CLI. We'll do a simple command line application. We'll take a look at a Yeoman project generator, and I'll tell you what that's all about. We'll bootstrap up a web project. We'll take a look at VS Code, complete with C# debugging. And we'll take a quick look at the project structure. and we'll create a very simple model view controller, and we'll persist the data to a database, and lastly, we'll deploy it to a Linux VPS on DigitalOcean. Lots to get through, so you're going to have to bear with me a bit here. Any questions while I get set up here? Because I got a couple things.
Did they give a reason why they're changing the names back of the CS Proj and the web config?
Yeah, a little bit. God, I hope that connects to the internet. Hang on. I'll try and multitask here. Yeah, so .NET Core ended up growing significantly. And things got a little more intertwined than they thought. So you've got, what's the new desktop? UWP, is that right? So UWP now leverages Core, and they had a couple other things that are now leveraging the Core framework, and they ended up in a situation where some were using web config, some were using these other things, and so instead of breaking all of the existing stuff, they thought, well, we'll just use web config, change back to CS Proj, so just the new things need to kind of get back in line and work with the rest of it. Oh, Wi-Fi, come on. Don't do this to me. Oh, yes. Whoa. All right. Fantastic. All right. Should be fun. Okay. I have my notes here that I'm going to be referring to constantly. So, first thing here, just want to show you the dot. Oh, God. Sorry. My bad. 1 second. Oh, good? Is that good? Okay. Running the .NET command, you'll know that you have it installed properly if you're getting output here. So you'll get your version, your build number, see that you can pass a help flag to it to get all the options you can run. And we're just going to start off here with a .NET new. And the number of commands we'll be running with .NET is very, very small, probably about 4 or 5. We'll be running new, restore, build. And some of the entity framework stuff. So that's roughly about it. My bad. Man. It's gonna be a good night. Okay. Running that, you'll see a very simple output here, program CS and project JSON. So normally when you're running a project worth a damn, it's probably not this. So this doesn't really matter here, but we'll run a .NET restore. And what that's going to do is go out and fetch any dependency that's listed in that project JSON file and bring them down. So this is like any other package management system, be it npm, pip, packagist, whatever freaking acronyms other things have. We'll do a here. .NET run will run our command that's in there, and as you can see, with the hello world output there. Let's take a look at that file real quick. Really simple, about what you'd expect. I've got a number of commands I'll be referring to tonight, and for this one, man, forgive the formatting. Run .NET run again.
Good evening, SGF web devs. How about that .NET action running on Mac OS? Sweet nectar. It's sizzling like fajita meat.
Doesn't like to say fajita for some reason. And I think we should all just kind of take a moment and realize what's going on here, right? We're running C# .NET framework running a system process start, running bash, and passing a shell script. I think that's pretty damn cool. I don't care who you are. It's pretty cool. So that's it. Command line, just boring. I just wanted to show you that you can run command line. You can get any framework working in here, all that stuff. So next, we're going to mess with Yeoman. So anybody not familiar with Yeoman? There should be at least a few. Yeah, it's mainly a Node thing. It's mainly a front end thing. It's born out of the Node ecosystem. And we'll touch on this just a little bit later as well. But Visual Studio Code doesn't have a file new project concept. So when you're working with Visual Studio, it's file new project, web, MVC, and all the other awesome stuff, right? Well, Visual Studio Code doesn't have that. There's no concept of wiring out a new application. So Yeoman, what it is among many other things, it's a task runner that will bootstrap a site out for you. There's a lot of community-driven recipes, if you will, out there, what they call generators. When you install them, you can simply run, like we're going to, yo ASP.NET, and it'll script out a full functioning application for us. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. I'm not going to cover installing that. It is in Microsoft's documentation, and they do support it pretty heavily. So as I said, yo ASP.NET, and we'll get a little prompt here. Asks us what kind of application we want to install. A number of choices here. We are going to go with a web application, and then it asks me, you want to use Bootstrap or Semantic UI? And if this were a real project, I'd say I don't care because I'm deleting it anyways. Go ahead and go with Bootstrap here. The name of the application we'll just call SGF. Rips through, sets up the entire project. So again, equivalent to file new project. Pretty much the same thing. Nothing else really going on there. At the end, up here a little bit, notice that it also does run some extra commands. So it ran Bower install for us. So Bower, yep. So Bower went out and fetched a bunch of front-end assets for us, jQuery, private validation, yep, Bootstrap. You don't have to use that. It comes by default, but you certainly don't have to. So we'll change directory into our app that we just created. Just take a quick look at it. It sets up the whole thing, controllers, models, it's all there. We'll run a .NET restore to go out and fetch. Man, I know, DN or just D. .NET restore again. I'll hit that project JSON file, fetch down any dependencies that's needed. You know, one interesting aspect I want you to know about this is in gosh, this is real hard to see. I'm sorry. In my users folder, I have a NuGet directory, and inside of there, I got a bunch of NuGet packages. So normally these are installed to your project, right? You run a NuGet restore or whatever, and it will pull down all those packages, put it right into your project. Well, now they're stored centrally to the system. So if you've got different versions that you're running, whatever, they're all going to store in this folder as opposed to your project, and the project knows where to reference those, and that will be the same thing on your remote server. So the nice thing here, of course, is you don't have to worry about these accidentally getting included in your repository, or however you're shipping this. If you're not running some sort of build out on your server, you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about shipping this with your project. It's pretty cool. I really like it, and it saves on time too, because it will check if you have them locally, and if it matches the right version, it'll just pull it right from there. It won't go re-download it every time. So pretty nice. And I haven't messed with this enough to feel this burn just yet, but even with like Node, man, you run a npm install, and I mean, hell, you've got 100 megs worth of files right there. I would like it if Node would do something like this, honestly. That'd be pretty cool. I want to see. We'll run a restore. We'll run a build now. So I'm running build, and it'll do exactly what you think. It'll build out the project. And something interesting there, you'll notice that it compiled some assets. CSS and JavaScript does that by default. I don't have to run build. I can just run it, .NET run, and it will also build it. But I just wanted to show you that you could just build for the sake of building. But we will do a .NET run here. You'll see it'll build again. And at the end, I'll get a little link there. Now listening on localhost port 5000. What this is running on is a web server called Kestrel. This is new. It's not running on IIS Express. It's a new web server, really lightweight, and it does the job. Pull it up, and if anybody's worked with MVC 6 or hell, maybe even 5, I think this is about what you get out of that. This is a fully functioning .NET MVC website, complete with registration, so all the user auth, all that good stuff. Right now, if I were to try and hit any of this, it would bomb because I don't have a database set up yet, and we'll get into that in a moment as well. Just wanted to kind of give you a preview of the site. So we'll go ahead now and open Visual Studio Code, and you can open it quickly by just running code, telling it I want to open this directory, and here we go. I'm trying to make this bigger. All right, a lot better for you, a lot worse for me over here. First thing I want to call your attention to, that little banner at the top that slid down, you may have noticed, says required assets to build and debug are missing from your project. Add them. I'm going to click yes, and I want you to watch in the upper left-hand corner in the file explorer up there. This creates a config specific to VS Code. We won't go into details about a lot of these files, but just know that this is the configuration needed for debugging in Visual Studio Code. And you can actually customize this to your heart's content. You can have a number of tasks that you run through VS Code by setting the names and what they should do in this launch JSON and task config file. Another thing you'll want when you install VS Code for the first time is, if you're using it for .NET development, you're definitely going to want to install a plugin called C#. So it seems like it would be in there by default, but it's not. You can get a number of plugins for VS Code. It's actually really powerful and surprisingly a really good JavaScript editor. So you can do some pretty powerful node debugging in here. It's really nice. All of the IntelliSense and Visual Studio-esque feels and features come from this C# plugin built by Microsoft, and it uses a little tool called OmniSharp, which I believe is an open source project, and they're leveraging that. And OmniSharp will also run on Sublime Text. It'll run on, what's the other one? Not Sublime, but Atom. There we go. Yep, Atom. Vim, I believe. It's pretty wild. But Visual Studio Code is, in my opinion, the way to go. It's supported officially by Microsoft, so you're probably going to have a little bit better experience in there. So make sure to get that plugin. We're going to fly over some of these files here. We know what a lot of these are, right? Controller inside of data. We got our DB context that it's set up because of the users that it's wired up, and models there for the users. Launch settings, JSON file, kind of interesting. Again, so much of this we don't have time to touch on. But you can now set environment variables. It's native to the framework now. You can do tons of different checking now with environments, run builds differently and all that good stuff. And it's now supported to override, and maybe it is. I'm a little behind on some of this stuff, but now you can override with your config files depending on your environment just by way the file is named. If there's a value that overrides another value in another config file, it'll override it. Really nice. Views, of course. Yep, www. This has been in there for a little while. It's where all your front-end assets go. Here's the Bower stuff, so you can set up your dependencies. One really cool thing about this is they really didn't skimp on, well, they did in some areas, we'll touch on that later, but some of these areas, they really didn't skimp in the IntelliSense, right? If I wanted to go get, say, Fancy Box, for example, pretty much any other front-end framework here, pretty much anywhere there's a config file that you can set dependencies on, it will go out and check all these endpoints and figure out, oh, you wanted Fancy Box, and you probably wanted the latest version. So pretty cool. If you forget the exact name of something, just start typing it in, you'll probably find it.
Doesn't it also show you available versions?
Yeah, so in Bower, it didn't, everything I tried with Bower, but in the project JSON where you would put like NuGet package names, it will come up with a drop-down list of versions in there, yep. Couldn't get it working with Bower though. I don't really use Bower anyway, so I don't really care. Bundle config, a lot of people, especially those in like the PHP and the more node world, really probably won't use this because they've got minification and bundling, all that stuff going on via a different process. using other tools. But out of the box, it's nice. You can get some really simple bundling in here, and that's been around for a while too, so that's not really anything new. This Docker file, I failed to mention that the .NET CLI will actually wire out a web app for you. You pass it a -t web, and it will script out an app for you. It's missing some things, and this Docker file in specific is one thing that is missing. So that's why I'm still using Yeoman. Microsoft is still behind Yeoman, so until they officially put it into the .NET CLI, I'm going to keep using Yeoman because there are a couple of niceties. This is one of them. We'll touch on Docker later. Program CS, something kind of shipped up here. It kind of feels almost a little bit more desktop appy at some point. So this is basically the bootstrapping point of everything, wiring up Kestrel IIS integration. Again, we're not going to spend time on this, and to be honest, I still am learning both the concept of this file and the startup CS file, which is where you plug in a bunch of your middleware. So, for example, in here, this is where we add our DB context. It's where we add the fact that we're using MVC, where we're injecting services to be used throughout the entire app, checking development modes, doing other things depending on which one it is, controlling the fact that it uses static files, so we can completely turn that off, not use identity. So, like I said, every bit of this is now configurable. The defaults that it come with, though, are pretty nice. It's a good starting point. Doing this all from scratch would kind of suck, but it's nice that we can tweak it. And then, of course, your MVC routes down here, registration. And, of course, web config. Look how girthy it is. Nothing in there. Still a little confused about what's going on here, so whatever. Oh, and then the last one, Project JSON. Again, I wasn't kidding when I said every piece of this is modular. Look at all. I mean, every piece is listed in there as a dependency for it to go out and fetch. So again, doing this from scratch would not be fun, but the fact that we can is nice. Some scripts in here, so you'll notice right here this .NET bundle runs every time we run and build. Okay, cool. That's that's a list of the files there. So another thing about Visual Studio Code that I was really tickled to finally see working is debugging. When it was first launched, and for a long time after it launched, there was no debugging in there. They had like node debugging and some PHP debugging. I'm like, what the hell, man? Visual Studio, why is there no C# debugging? Finally there, so I just wanted to show it to you real quick. We got our breakpoint set, so instead of running it in the command line like we ran .NET Run, we'll come over here to the debug console, and I've got this drop down. I'm going to keep it on launch in the web, but remember those two little config files it created at the very beginning? Here's where you could set up a number of different build scripts to run. So these are the ones that are right out of the box. I'll go ahead and hit run. And we'll get a lot of the same output we got before. Orange denotes that it's debugging now. Awesome. And I put it on my about. Minimize this now. Pops us back into our editor, of course. And as you can see, we get our local variables showing up over here on the left. I got a different keyboard here. Whatever. Let's use this. Is this, yeah, step over. Cool. I'm stepping through. I can come down here. I don't know how well you're going to see this or not. Print out view data. And down there's view data. I can poke through, and you know, it's not as robust as Visual Studio would be. I still can hover over things. I find that it can be a little bit. View data is going to be a bad example, I think. Oh no, there we go. And again, I can drill down through these things, so a little bit more finicky than, you know, Visual Studio, but awesome that we can do this. Like, this is, you know, quite a pipe dream, to be honest. So that's the basics of debugging. We'll come back and look at that here again in a little bit. Go ahead and turn the breakpoint off for now. And just some other kind of pros and cons about Visual Studio Code I threw in here randomly that I want to talk about is one of them is IntelliSense in views. We'll take a look at a view later, and there's no IntelliSense. I can strongly type the view, and I won't get access to anything, so that kind of sucks. Syntax highlighting at times is really good, and then at other times it's just a big white string, and I can't visually parse like what I'm looking at very well. So that still needs to go a little bit further. And then I think one of the biggest things overall that is file generation. So we're very used to being able to go right-click on controllers, add new controller. Yes, I'd like to strongly type that. And you know what? Yeah, make it a list. Boom, and it pops all that out, right? You don't have to worry about namespacing or any of that crap. It just does it. That doesn't exist in here. You're doing everything by hand. So I really hope that that comes along further, because you don't realize how much you miss that until it's gone. But the pros are awesome. I, for the most part, personally do prefer a more lightweight editor. So it's awesome having kind of that lightweight feel of a Sublime text, but with just enough grit of Visual Studio to be able to really do some work. It's got a little bit further to go, but I think they're definitely on the right track here. Okay, let's actually get down and do some work, huh? I run a website, some of you might know. It's called QuipVid, and I seem to use this for all my demos because I've got a lot of stuff there. I've got an API I can hit, and I can just bring stuff back, and I know, the data structure very well. So I'm going to continue that, and what we're going to build here is I'm going to fetch all of, what QuipVid is, I should explain this, is essentially a YouTube for movie quotes. You go there, you can search movies and watch funny quotes. It's good fun. What I'm going to do is pull back a JSON list of all of the entries on there, and then save that to the database here, and then display those up on the screen. So pretty simplistic, but it should touch on a lot of key points. So the way I like to work is when I'm working with a new feature, just start with some of the basics here. So call it Quips controller, and since again we don't have that awesome file creation for us, I'm just going to do a lot of copying and pasting here. For some reason the shortcuts don't like to work. I don't know what's up with that. Quips controller. Whoa. You guys can see this good, yeah? Needs to be bigger, any? Good, because I don't have any more room on my screen. So we got our Quips controller here, just an action result of index, return a view. Who's not at all familiar with .NET MVC? That's it, just 2 people? Right? Shit, okay. Well, I probably won't spend a whole lot of time talking on this. If you guys have more questions, we'll talk afterwards. We will create a view in here. A new folder. Quips. File. Index as HTML. And again, we're just going to grab some stuff. Paste word? Yeah. Sweet. Quips. Take out that message since we're not passing that in. So I've just got a really simple index controller here. It's returning the view. That's it. Not passing anything to it yet. We'll go ahead and debug. Awesome, and Quips should get me Quips. Awesome, cool. We're up and running. That's great. And next, now that we have our point set up, we'll go ahead and create the model. Yes, I don't think I've got anything set up here. I do have. Awesome. Format the code. As you can see, absolutely nothing special going on here. I don't want to deal with much. I've got a users obviously treated as just a string. IDs treated as a string. That's fine. It's just for simplicity's sake. Now that we have just our core model set up here, we'll add it into our DB context. And here, DB set, Quip, sorry, I kind of zooming past here. Notice, Quip coming up there. I feel right at home. It's awesome. I like Quips. Who's run Entity Framework migrations and that whole thing? That's good. I gotta be honest, I didn't even know it existed until I started diving in here. I'm like, oh shit, they have migrations and everything. And I think it's existed for a while. I'm quite certain it has. I thought it was new. It's not. So because of that, I'm still kind of learning about it. But from what I've gathered here, somebody please step in if I'm misspeaking. I can run, let me make sure I'm in the right spot here. Yep, okay. .NET EF, so this is another command in .NET EF migrations add, and then I pass it a name. Name can be whatever. I'll just call it Great Quips. Now when I run this, I'm going to switch quickly back over to VS Code, and you should see in the migrations file something pop up. Migrations. Bam. There we go. So this, if you're familiar with like Laravel or Rails, I haven't used Rails in a long time, but at least in Laravel, migrations are something you got to kind of peck out by hand. So it's kind of cool. It picked up that there was a piece of the DB context that it didn't have a migration for, and it generated the migration out for it based on the model. And you can get pretty complex in here. You can have relations and everything. It will pick that up and generate them out. Now, what I can't speak confidently to is what happens when I want to change a type in there. I want to drastically change something that's been migrated. Yeah, I don't know. Still need to figure that out. But it is pretty cool. It does work. So I have a migration. The migration tells the database how it should, set up its schema, right? The idea here being, because I know not too many people raise their hands, the idea here being these are stored in your project. You ship it around to your developers. They don't have the database set up, or maybe they've got an old version of it. The idea here is that they just run the migration script and whoosh, it wires up their database to what it should be, so you don't have to pass them necessarily like a backup of the database. Here, use this. So in theory, it's pretty nice. .NET EF database update. I got that right. Now, before I run this, I want to bring up SGF. Oh, crap. I know how small that is. Okay. Just have a watch as good as you can here. At the top there, you should see a database. Yep. So it's a SQLite file. By default, it uses a SQLite file on the file system. And what it just did there is it wired up my entire database to work for all the user models and the quip model that I just made. So to prove this, we will take this and drop it into a little SQLite viewer here. There it is. I know you can't see it at all, and I can't make it bigger. You'll just have to trust me. In here, there's also a migrations table, so it'll keep track of any migrations that you ran. It timestamps them when it creates it, and it'll know what order to run the migrations in. And if I go back to tables again, here's our quips and the structure of it all. So yeah, pretty cool. I don't have to do any of that stuff. Man, cool. So now that our database is set up, we can go ahead and fetch that data and put it in our system. So to give you an idea here, this is the data that we're going to go fetch. There's about 400, I think exactly 475 entries here. We're going to grab them all and store them into the database. Sweet. I have got a little guy set up. There it is. Okay, got a few things to do here. We'll just step through each one. First thing is the using statements. We've got a couple pieces here. We're going to bring... Oh, I've got this set up for Friday's demonstration. SGF. Cool. Bringing in data to get our data context, models to get our quip model, and systemnet HTTP to pull in our little fetcher. You can think this is dirty or think whatever you want of it. I don't care. Just bringing in our DB context here, quips controller, Context, application, DB, context. You should have that, no? Bueller? What are you doing? SGF data, SGF models. What are you whining about?
Namespace, but not the class. Yeah, you're in the namespace.
Ah! Thank you. Good to go. Quips controller context, and I've just got a little nastiness set up here. In there, and then I left this one intentionally. I'm using Newtonsoft JSON, using JSON convert down here, and just wanted to show you that you do get, the ability to say yes using Newtonsoft JSON, and put the statement up there. And this is a lot what I was talking about too. Of I know it's run off the screen, sorry. Just there, you can't visually parse that very well. I wish the IntelliSense would get a little bit better because it's a little rough. The funny thing is it still does work this, so I can command click, for example, on Quip and get to that model. So it still is picking it up, it's just doing a shitty job of coloring it. Really simple here, just setting up an HTTP client, using getString async, calling out to that point. JSON convert, deserialize it to get a list of quips and passing in that JSON string, and then adding the quips to the range, save changes, throw back a string of success, hopefully anyways. We'll set just a breakpoint right here. Go ahead and rebuild. Just make sure we can get to our quips still. Good. And fetch them. Alright, fingers crossed. Step through here. Make sure we get a big old fat JSON string. Yeah, I think I saw it. Yeah, oh yeah, tons of it. Go ahead and parse it. Over here, should see a list of 475 of them. This will be a little rough, but expand it down and just click on a random one here and see that, we do get that insight into it. What's going on? I'm still blown away by it. Step over, add them, save changes. Great. We're good to go. Let's go verify that. Take a look at our database. Tables. Quips. There they all are. Persisted in the database. Awesome. Go ahead and stop running here. And what we'll do next is go back to our view. Quips. Yep. And I've got something wired out again, so you have to sit here and watch me type. I don't know that all these are required. I don't know what the hell that's doing. Whatever. The important thing here is we got a model. We're strongly typing the view to an enumerable list of SGF models, Quip. So we got that. And sounds like most people in here are familiar with MVC. So what happened if I format? I can't format it. Gah, whatever. Razor templates here. So this should be familiar to most of you. If not, I think you can pretty much figure out what's going on. If you've never seen Razor before, hopefully this is pretty sexy to you. I mean, usually doing stuff like this is gross. You've got angle brackets everywhere and just equal signs and like, my God, just let me get at the data. Yeah. So in Razor, it's just an @ symbol and you're in C# mode. So cool, I can access Quip and video and all the properties of Quip in there. It's fantastic. Again here, no IntelliSense, so like doing a model.take 10 is none of this is going to come up. But yeah, still nice. So this will rip over each one. I'm passing back, or rather not passing back. We still need to go do that. I'm just going to throw in all the quips, all 475 of them, just for the hell of it. And then we'll just grab 10 of them here and display them out. So come back into our quips controller and quips Oh, jeez. Equipped. Index. Equips. To list. Awesome. And we'll just pass that into the view there. Sweet. So we're passing into the view and then again strongly typing the view here. So if we were in Microsoft and using Visual Studio, real Visual Studio, you'd be able to get all the niceness of that strong typing. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and run it and see what we get. That HTML was nasty, by the way. You got like hard-coded CSS in there. It's great. And there we go. So, listen out, 10 of them. This might be about how you're feeling right now. I don't know.
Uppercase A. All right. Whoa.
Classic. So yeah, that's our nice little app there. The last thing we have to do, I know we're cutting close on time here, we're going to try and power through it, is deploy this. So I just want to verify here that this is not yielding anything. And it's not. Fantastic. DigitalOcean, anybody familiar? A couple of us? Great. So, awesome for hosting Linux VPS servers, cheap, fast, pretty damn reliable. So most of the time, I would think, depending on the shop you work for, you'll probably host this in Azure, or you've got your own hosting set up already. But for those of us that might be new to the world, we don't want to get on super expensive Microsoft hosting stack, right? So the fact that I'm running this on a $5 a month Linux server is just awesome. I mean, this is just a whole new world. Speaking of whole new world, so is the technologies used to run this. So hopefully that goes smoothly for us. We'll find out. I have got a close implementation of everything that we've done already sitting out on GitHub. It's just a public repo. It's called TTF test. I've already pulled this repository down to a server. Everything's up and running on this server. It's just a vanilla Ubuntu server, and in DigitalOcean, when you set up a new server, you can create it from an image, and they have a Docker image. And I'll try and do the 30-second explanation of Docker, which is going to be pretty poor. Think of it kind of like, and they'll probably yell at you, Docker people, if you say this, but think of it kind of like a virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log on to the server, and I'm going to say, I want you to create a new Docker image based upon a recipe that I'm going to provide you. And that recipe that I'm referring to is this Docker file here. And the very top line says from Microsoft.NET Latest. Microsoft maintains a Docker image that contains all the essentials for running .NET. And what it is it's an enclosed environment. It's in its own little bubble. And so when I run this, it will grab that image and then run any commands that I have here after it on that server. So it's kind of like a VM in that sense. It's self-contained, and I can run a ton of them on one server. I can run as many as I want. It's just a matter of resources at that point. So, having said that, let's give this a go. Log into the server. And see, I'm at root. So this is that repository that I pulled down already. I'll get in there. The Docker file is right there. And so any Docker commands I run will pick up on the fact that Docker file is in there. So if I tell it to run or install, it's going to pick up that Docker file and run basically the instructions that are in there. But first, what I want to do is Docker images. So if I run Docker images, this will list the VMs, for lack of a better word, that are on the machine. So these are here already because I've been running tests to make sure it works. I don't have anything running on there right now, but those are all there. They exist. So if I wanted to, I could essentially say, hey, spin up this one right here and just run it, right? I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is try and create a new one, and it shouldn't take any time at all. The first time you run it does take a while because it goes and downloads all the assets, but once you've downloaded it once, it keeps that core image there. So the bottom one there, Microsoft.net, is the one that I'm going to be running from. I'm going to spin up a new one from Microsoft.net. It's already there, so it can spin it up lickety-split. But if it's not there, it's got to go download it. Docker build, that's what I want. Yep, I think. So I'm in a directory that has the Docker file. And I'm going to run docker build, and then I'm going to give it a name of SGF test 2. This is some naming convention I just kind of picked up from what I saw in some demos. Docker ASP.NET. You can call it whatever you want, though. And then the period there is just saying, run it in this directory. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. It did it that fast. So, if I'm not mistaken, and if I run Docker images now, yeah, I have our SGF test 2 Docker instance in there. So now I can do things with it. Like I can start it up and let it do its thing. And that command, yep, is that. Docker run, sorry, I'm not even sure what the flags are on there, but the -p, this port, is important. If I come back to the Docker file, down here in this last one, it's running .NET run, which, hey, we're familiar. We've ran that a bunch of times tonight. And then you see this basically binding still to port 5000. So internally, it's still running on 5000. I could change it. I could tell it to run on 80. Or over here, I can tell it to bind port 80 to, map it to port 5000. And then pass it the name. I want to make sure it gets the right name here. Cool. And fingers crossed this works. Cool. Let's hit that URL again. There we go. Running in Docker. That concludes my presentation. That is the last thing I had in it, and I'm glad I got around to it. So. I'd be happy to take any questions. Absolutely.
And, can you tell me this Docker file that you got? Will I get that if I create my solution on a Windows box using the more traditional wizard? Do I still get that?
It's a good question. I honestly don't know. So the .NET CLI did not put this Docker file in there when I run that. Yeoman gave it, and I legitimately do not know if Visual Studio will put that file in there. But what I can tell you is you can take this exact same code and it'll work just fine. Like, it will run in that project. I don't see anything here that would be specific to running on Visual Studio. This is pretty agnostic. So.
What were the two commands you ran when you were SSH to get
Yep.
to bring your Docker in?
Yep. So, oh god, here, I'll just throw them in here. So, specifically, it was sorry, I'm trying to find the very first one you want to run. I think it's just that. Yeah, sorry. Yep, this guy right here. So when you're in that directory, docker build -t, and then you provide it a name, and that could be whatever you want. I don't think you need the slash in there or anything like that. So run that where that Docker file is located, and it'll take over and do its thing. The very first time you run it, it will go fetch via the instructions that are inside of the Docker file. It's going to hit that first line there and go get that .NET instance, and then finish doing its thing. And then once it's downloaded it and set it up, then the only other command you need to run is this right here, docker run -t-p to bind port, and then the name of it. So those are your two commands.
Why do you have the apt-get install SQLite 3 and SQLite?
I'm glad you asked. Very glad you asked.
You can add that to your Docker image.
You can.
Okay.
And you know what? This Docker image file has it in there.
Yeah, okay.
But you know what? I don't know if it's an Ubuntu thing. I don't know if you get this running fine on Debian. I don't know. But a lot of times what happens when you run this is you'll get a, hey, we're going to download 30 packages. Is that cool? Yes. And I think it's that tripped it up. It came back and said it didn't come back with the response code of 0, bombed, would not continue executing. So what I did on the server was just ran those manually, commented that line out, ran it again. It may have just been a thing for me. I don't know. I looked it up, couldn't find many other people with the issue.
I'm pretty sure there's a flag on apt-get to just assume yes.
Probably yes. Yep.
Okay.
So, yeah. That's why that's in there. See, I put some other notes. See if there's anything else worthwhile. Docker images, we'll list out your images. Docker stop, and then just a little trick in there to basically tell it to stop everything running. Otherwise, just pass an ID to it. But you can find these all online. But yeah, these are the 2 important ones down there. Docker's a whole thing in itself. We had a presentation on it a while ago. It was,
Adam Ingebrigtsen did a presentation here 5-6 months ago,
Yeah.
7 months ago.
Yep.
We should have that
Mm.
a video of that.
It is. Yep. It's definitely online.
If you're interested in Docker stuff, I am too. I would love to have a session just practicing doing Docker builds and that kind of stuff. It's
Yep.
quite a bit to learn. The whole concept of Docker is a virtual file system, so it's not a full VM. It kind of runs under one operating system, but it isolates everything out, and it has its own file system that's dedicated to its run. And that's what it's a virtual VM kind of thing. It's really neat.
So those images you have in there, they're actually duplicated every time you create a new one. It doesn't use that newest that you had up there, but it actually makes a copy of that. Is that right?
I don't know.
That's what's interesting about it.
Yeah.
It stacks and builds. It actually kind of compiles it on the fly. So even though his base, just if you pull up your listed images,
Stop running.
it's a hierarchy of images. So you can, in the first line of your Docker file, you said here's my image to use, which
Yep.
was Microsoft whatever.
Yep.
That's the base image it will download, and then basically it stacks your changes on top of it. So even though
you're
it
not
says
duplicating, essentially, you're
that's
not
right,
yeah.
right. So even though it says 650 or whatever, those files are really only the difference, the 100 megs difference or whatever.
Correct.
That's what the virtualized file system does. It gets really complex. It gets really deep. But yeah, it makes this stacked file system kind of
Yeah.
concept. It's really neat.
So the side you're seeing is, I'm sorry, this is all Docker questions, but the side you're seeing there is the total image then, sort of the stacked complete
Yeah.
image? Okay. No more Docker questions.
I wish I could answer them better. I really can't. It's something that I really do want to get into. What else?
Visual Studio 2015. So any kind of support for Visual Studio Core in
Really good support. Yeah, better support than you would see in VS Code. They say, Mac and Linux are being treated as first-class citizens. Probably second-class citizens. Visual Studio and Microsoft is still first-class citizen. But it's coming along nicely. I am thrilled that I'll be able to start running on my OS of choice. A lot of the big CMSs are gunning towards ASP.NET Core. Braco, for example. Sitefinity, I think. Yeah. What's up, Fred?
Do we have to have Docker, or is this
Nope.
Microsoft
Nope.
plan to?
Nope. You can run it exactly how I have been. You can run via Kestrel. I think you can still get this running in IIS. I've not done it yet, but I do believe so. Docker is certainly not a requirement. Microsoft's pushing hard on it, though. They do want it to be kind of the preferred way that you host on, a little bit more commodity environments.
I do know that Microsoft is working on porting SQL Server to POSIX.
Yep.
Be more platform independent, so we'll be able to run SQL Server on Linux. I think in the next version that they're working on releasing. I do have another question. What happened to Project Roslyn, the auto compiler stuff?
Oh,
Am I missing out?
yeah. Hey, no. So Roslyn's still a thing. It's so low level. I don't even truly know how to speak to it. But one of the great things still about the Windows environment, working in Visual Studio Real proper, is you no longer need to compile your project every time you make a CS change. When you run in the browser, it will compile behind the scenes on the fly. Forever, I was waiting for that to come over to the Mac side with VS Code. It wasn't coming. There is now a watcher that you can run. So you saw me compile every time and wait for it to come back up. There is a watch command that you can run. I find it's excruciatingly slow. So they really need to get some more work behind that. It does work. It's too brutal. But yes, on Windows it works well. Real well. I don't know if this will work, but I wanted to try it. Nope, never mind. Sorry.
What about going to production? Production ready?
People are running in production. Me personally, it's got to be probably a smaller project to do it on. I would not do it on a large-scale project. And not so much because of the concern of like, oh, it's not secure or it's not stable enough, but the level of churn that I've seen over the past year is immense. So I would be a little scared about doing a really large app and having to redo it 3 months later. So just be cautious. If it's a smaller project, I'd say go for it. In fact, I probably, one of my next projects I probably will do on top of this, some smaller scale ones. I'm really excited about it. What else? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys.